we are witnessing in a different nation. World over, I am very happy to share with all of you a very important event which we are focusing in the new year 2012. January 6th, 7th, 8th, we are going to organize international conference at Chennai Trade Center. This is a very important event and ICA point of view. Today, you must have seen world over number of problems faced by this accountancy profession, as well as the other areas like financial crisis we are witnessing in a different nations. World over, there are a number of debates taking place relating to the role and responsibilities of the professionals, especially our accountancy profession. ICA is the second largest accounting body in the world, with more than 1,83,000 members and 9 lakh students as on today, functioning as a vibrant accounting body in the world. We have very strong representation in International Federation of Accountants, South Asian Federation of Accountants, Confederation of Asia Pacific Accountants. These bodies are fully recognizing the role and responsibilities of the ICAI. In spite of the various issues faced by the ICA within India as well as outside India, we are able to provide a very strong support to the nation. Today's economic conditions, the growth is taking place world over, especially in India. We have seen that the large amount of multinational companies are operating in India. Our Indian companies and corporates are establishing their own service centers, manufacturing centers outside India. Truly, we can say the globalization has started in India in every respect and every spectrum. Our institute is also not lacking behind. We have already entered an agreement, mutual recognition agreements with various accounting bodies in the world for the purpose of recognizing our professional qualifications. And in response to that, we are also recognizing the professional qualification of the respective accounting bodies outside India, especially Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, CPA Australia, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Australia, Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants, CPA Ireland. Now we are also going to get a further agreement with Institute of Chartered Accountants of New Zealand. Many institutes are coming forward to get the recognitions with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So this international conference is paving the way for creating a greater network for Indian Chartered Accountants with foreign delegates. We are expecting a large number of foreign delegates as well as a very large number of very good speakers from the various countries going to address in this international conference. We are also expecting a good number of faculties within India, speakers within India, and corporate advisors within India, as well as the regulated side. We are also getting for the purpose of participation in deliberations and discussions to be taken place in the international conference. We are expecting nearly about 3,000 chartered accountants are going to participate in this international conference. This international conference will address about the value creation, networking with the chartered accountants within India and as well as internationally. And we are also calling the international chapter presidents, chairmen, and also different parts of the country from different type of spectrum of practitioners are going to come to India. Their participation will be very much useful to all of us to understand what is happening within India and as well as globally. We have seen that the large number of participation in earlier also in many conferences. But this conference is going to be a unique conference which is going to provide a support for networking of Indian accounting firms along with the other firms. And second, an important event which is going to be focused is XBRL, There will be an XBRL pavilion which is going to provide you support for this XBRL learning exercise as well as cloud computing also. And we are expecting capital markets, corporate governance, and its disclosures are going to be debated and discussed in this conference. Similarly, international taxation, anti-money laundering, all these things are going to be discussed in this conference. This conference will pave the way for a successful event in the minds of the Indian chartered accountants. Through global accounting profession, we have to create global accounting professionals from India. Naturally, we have to focus and showcase our activities internationally. This will be webcasted through our regular media, and it will be witnessed as one of the very, very important for the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. This being organized at Southern Region, I feel all of them should join for this conference, participate in this conference, and send your views for this conference for further improvement, and later on we can see that there will be a further development in this profession. This profession is always providing support for the cause of the nation. We are truly the partners for the nation building. The limited liability partnership concept has been approved by our Institute of Chartered Accountants of India Council. It paves the way for bringing a very large accounting firm from India. Similarly, we are expecting a multidisciplinary partnership firms are going to come in India, wherein chartered accountants, company secretaries, cost accountant, MBA, finance, and large number of persons can be a form part of the partners of the chartered accounting firms. That will give a multidisciplinary activities of the firm. So large multinational accounting firms will be created from India so that they can provide service in globally. It's a great opportunity for all of you to come and join for this conference, interact with all your friends, and also you can share views for the purpose of improving this profession in this nation. With this, I welcome all of you to register for this conference, provide support in the form of sponsorship, providing the support of your own viewpoints for the purpose of improving the performance of the ICA, and you can also provide a critical analysis of the various issues like corporate governance, capital market, regulatory issues in India, accounting standards, and IFRS, whether it will be implemented or not, and international taxation, bringing the money stashed outside India can be brought back to India, the suggestions, double taxation avoidance, and various other subjects you can provide support with, so that ICA can project this profession in a greater manner in this country. And with this, I once again welcome all of you for this international conference. Jai Hind and Jai ICA.
Vanakkam, good morning to everyone. Today we are in the last day of this refresher course, and the additional registration which is coming today is only because of the feedback which has been sent on behalf of us and on behalf of you to the various peoples, and we thank for the feedbacks which is being communicated, saying that this particular course was this much useful, that much not useful, and any positive or negative is welcome. And now for this last day, I would request the speaker of the first session, Santana Krishnan sir, to kindly come and occupy the dais. The current day will be of a 3 hour. That is the reason why we had a coffee break before the start of the session, and up to 1 o'clock this session will go, and from 1 to 2 we have a lunch, and at 2 o'clock Jagadishan will be coming and it will be sharply started at 2 o'clock, and from 2 to 5 we will be having the session, and then we will have a Christmas coffee break at the end of the day, wishing all Christmas for the thing. That is the way in which we have organized for the day. Now I would take the privilege of honoring the speaker with a shawl. மாம்பழமா மாம்பழம், சேலத்து மாம்பழம். அந்த மாம்பழம் என்றாலே சேலம் என்பது போல், when we have a speaker from the mafshal, speaker from the up country, or speaker from the area other than metro, when we are just referring such things, this is the year, in the Diamond Jubilee year, wherein we have introduced many such speakers from all over the cities of Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Andhra Pradesh, and one such person will be immediately said, referred by the organizers will be CAN Santana Krishnan, who is a BSc Mathematics graduate from Loyola College, CA final rank in 1966 with a rank in 1966, ICWA final in 1967 in first attempt. He is a member of the Fiscal Law Committee of SARC of the ICAI, Regional Direct Tax Advisory Committee of the Government of India. He is in the Committee for Building Capacity of CFMs nominated by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, New Delhi. And he has a chartered accountant. His first daughter and first son-in-law are practicing chartered accountants. Second daughter is a practicing company secretary. He has presented papers and chaired many seminars at different places in South India. A trustee of few charitable institutes, chairman and managing committee of a school in which he studied. That is Salem CAN Santana Krishnan for us in this first session. Over to you, sir.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Arloli, for having introduced me, and more for having presented me a shawl which is very necessary for the over chillness of the hall. I requested Mr. Arloli to find out whether the chillness can be reduced. He said once members come here,
the assessment and the reassessment debate starts, automatically the heat will be generated and you will be asking for more chillness.
And he also told me the more number of delegates occupy the auditorium, the hall, they will absorb the chillness and chillness will reduce. So I do not know whether what I am going to speak today will be absorbed or whether chillness will be absorbed. With this, I think we will move on to the paper, as already we are a little ahead of time. The first case study is, as books of account of an assessee are claimed as lost, an assessment is made by the AO ex parte under section 144. The AO refuses to consider the available statements audited by a chartered accountant. The excess advance tax paid and self-assessment tax paid are refused to be refunded. So this is the case study. First of all, books of accounts are claimed to be lost. When can the books of accounts may be lost? Maybe by fire accident, might be by theft, or might have been misplaced. If it is a fire accident, the assessee who claims that the books of accounts were lost should be able to produce some evidence from the fire station authorities showing that they attempted to put out the fire. If it is a case of theft, there should be FIR in a police station. If it is a case of misplacement, he must confirm that he has not been able to trace them till the date of hearing or till the completion of assessment. These are circumstances. Now, books of accounts means, what are books of accounts? That is the next question we have to pass to. Subsection 20 of section 2 defines books of accounts to include ledger books, cash books, day books, account books and other books, whether kept in a written form or as printout of data stored in a floppy disk or tape or other data storage device. This is the definition it gives. As usual, it does not lead us nowhere. But the word book has been defined by the Lordships of Kerala High Court. According to Kerala High Court, the word book means a collection of number of sheets of paper of uniform shape, size and value, bound at one edge so as to form a whole material, covered by the same kind of material in the front and at the back, having functional use, maintained by an assessee. This is the definition of the book. So if we go to form 3CD, so though it may be a side matter, I will tell you. So 3CD, there is one class requires books of accounts maintained, books of accounts examined. Many of us say, please see enclosure. We write day books, cash books, journals, copies of vouchers, bills issued by the assessee, receipts of customers, this, that, bank statements and all. Not all necessary. Let us not overburden our responsibility by writing everything. Books of accounts mean, according to the definition, only journals, cash books and ledgers only. Even our Chartered Institute's tax audit book suggests only these may be given. Vouchers and bank statements and receipts, copies of them do not constitute books of accounts at all. Books of accounts means books in which original entries are transacted. The others only support the entries which are recorded in the books of accounts. So if the vouchers and receipts are lost, the AO cannot say that the books of accounts have been lost, therefore I will pass 144 assessment order. Suppose the assessee does not produce the books, but the books have been subject to audit by a qualified chartered accountant. Tax audit report in 3 CD is available in the records. Now annexure is written. In the cases of scrutiny assessments during the hearing, they are filed. So can the AO ignore them? What is the purpose of getting books of accounts audited? Under the Companies Act, it is to show that the profit or loss account and balance sheet represent true and fair view of the profit or loss or of the state of affairs as on the net of the balance sheet. For tax audit, the additional point is the entries recorded in the books of accounts are supported properly by vouchers or by the expenses claimed. So when a chartered accountant has audited the books of accounts, the AO cannot reject the claim that books were kept, even though the assessee is not able to produce them before him during the hearing. Once they have been audited, he must give respect to it. He cannot overthrow the books. Now this is the position. Now how about bank statements? Bank statements are also loose sheets. They do not conform to the definition of being bound at one edge. So bank statements also do not constitute books of accounts. An interesting case before Madras High Court, in yesterday decades, what happened was an assessee deposited huge sum of cash into bank account. He was required to explain the nature and source of the cash deposited. He was not able to explain. So the AO naturally added it as income. The Madras High Court deleted the addition on the ground that books of account means books maintained by the assessee. The bank passbook is maintained by the bank and not by the assessee. Therefore, Section 68 does not apply to it. That is the origin and history by which Section 69 was later introduced to say that every outgoing should also be explained. Therefore, loose bank statements do not constitute book. We are not expected to audit them under Section 3 CD. We are giving the tax audit report under Section 44 AP in Form 3 CD. Now the case study says books of accounts are claimed to be lost. So it suggests books of accounts are perhaps available, but the assessee claims that they are lost. Why should he? Is there any advantage in telling the AO that the books are lost, though he does have, he is in possession of them? Will it be useful? Yes. Under certain circumstances it is useful, because once the books are lost, the AO will have to fix a flat rate on the sales. Say 5% on the total sales, 8% on the total sales, he will assess it. Once he applies a flat rate of assessment on the gross receipts or turnover, he cannot make any other addition unto it legally. He is prohibited from going to any other matter because he rejects the books of accounts. Books of accounts are not available. Even if they are produced, if the AO holds that the books are defective and overthrows and rejects the books, he cannot rely on the same rejected books to find out, say, whether there was a cash payment exceeding 20,000 at a time, whether there was any payment made without deduction of tax at source. Addition under 40A3 or 40A1A cannot be made even though tax was not deducted at source, even though cash was paid in exceeding a sum of 20,000 rupees at a time for purchase or expenditure, because there is no specific item which is being considered for being allowed or disallowed. Everything is closed. The flat rate assessment takes care of everything. Even income tax and wealth tax paid also cannot be added separately. So the flat rate assessment will be very useful under certain cases, even if the books are maintained. That is why the case study says they are claimed to be lost. Now, ethically, can you be a party to it? When there is a possibility, when books of accounts are not compulsory, when the claim that the books have been lost will help the client, there is nothing wrong in saying, in leading to a flat rate 144 assessment and getting the additions under 40A3, 40A1A, income tax, wealth and other additions avoided. So, these are the case laws in which I have decided. One is a definition of books of account. No addition can be made into it. The last two are that. Those even the Madras Tribunal has also decided so in 4 DTR. Madras High Court in 4 DTR has decided once a flat rate is adopted in assessment, no other addition into it can be made at all. The second one is an appeal is filed against an order giving effect to that of Commission of Income Tax Appeals contesting non-allowance of fresh claims made. So what does an appellate order say? They see it appeals or the appellate tribunal. They do not compute the income. The appellate authority only says he discusses the claims made by the assessee. He discusses the assessment order's contents. Then he says, I am allowing this claim partly gross profit rate is reduced from this rate fixed, percentage fixed by the AO to that admitted or partly allowed. This is confirmed. This is enhanced after giving opportunity and all. Then he says appeal is partly allowed or treated as partly allowed, he says. Then what does the AO do? He gives effect to the appellate order. He computes the income. The word assess means computing taxable income. So when an order giving effect on appellate order computes taxable income, it is an assessment order under section 143(3). Some of us tend to think that it is an order under section 154. It is not so. It is not. There has been no mistake apart from record. There has been scope and possibility for discussion and debates, arguments, pro and con. Only after that the appellate order comes to a decision, to a conclusion of arriving at the taxable income. Therefore, the order giving effect on appellate order is an assessment order under section 143(3). Therefore, once it is an assessment order, the assessee is eligible, he is entitled to make fresh claims during that. An appellate proceeding is only continuation of assessment proceeding. Technically, till the assessment order is given effect to, assessment proceedings are pending. Therefore, the assessee can claim. If the AO does not consider that claim, another appeal can be filed against that order giving effect to it, again to the C8 appeals, against the order of AO. So that is the position. But the limit is that the fresh claim cannot take the income to a less than the amount which has already been returned. So that is so far as case 2, study 2 is concerned. The Bombay High Court has held in a case that it is an assessment order and 143(3) only. Case study 3 is an assessment order is found to omitted to be signed. Some claim the department that I have signed the order sheet. Assessment order is only communication of the contents of the order sheet. Therefore, even if the assessment order is not signed, it is not invalid. Now, there are two types of errors. Some are curable mistakes, some are uncurable mistakes. Section 292 capital B deals with these uncurable and curable mistakes. It says, no return of income furnished, notice issued or taken, order passed, or any other proceeding shall be invalid or deemed to be invalid merely for the reason that there has been a defect, mistake, or omission in such a return, notice, order, or other proceeding, provided they are in substance and effect in accordance with the intent and purpose of the other provisions of the Act. So this long section, what does convey is curable mistakes, they do not make the proceedings invalid. Uncurable mistakes make the proceedings invalid. So when assessment order is not signed, or when an assessment order is passed on the basis of a return which has been omitted to be signed, or if a notice has not been properly served or not served on the correct person, they are all uncurable mistakes. The notice is invalid. The assessment based on such return or notice are also invalid. So they are all uncurable mistakes. For example, if I can tell you one experience which I had years back. Now, if you go to Central Station, railway station, there is a board. Notice board says no separate queue for ladies. Similarly, there were separate queues in the exteriors for ladies also for booking counters, and in the sleeper coaches also, only ladies. I traveled once from Bombay to Madras, the present Mumbai to Chennai. I found myself the only male passenger in the 72. All the 71 were female passengers. The conductor asked me, why are you here? Sir, I have been allotted this berth. Those days, small ticket with the name, I showed him. It read Santa Krishnan instead of Santana Krishnan. So I told him it is uncurable error, sir. I will be comfortable, I will travel here. Then he cured the mistake and sent me to some other compartment. These are the decisions which are curable mistakes in the nature, which are uncurable mistakes, where it is invalid, where it can be rectified. Case study 4 is a revised return reducing the originally returned income is filed after receipt of an intimation under section 143(1). The assessing officer wants to ignore such a return as belatedly and as invalid. So what happens is some of the clients file a return, then they come to us on fine morning, they say, sir, one item has been omitted. All right, we will file a revised return. He says, no sir, let auspicious date come. This is the month of Margazhi, we will wait, let Thai month come, we will file. Meanwhile, he receives an intimation under section 143(1). He gets upset. Sir, the order has been received, proceedings have been received. Can you file a revised return now? A revised return can be filed at any time before the expiry of 1 year period from the end of the relevant assessment year, or before receipt of the assessment order, completion of assessment, whichever is earlier. assessment order is different, 143(1) intimation is different. The legislative intent is very clear from the substitution of the word intimation in the place of the word assessment. 143(1) is only intimation, it is not an assessment. And some say acknowledgement itself is a notice of demand. When under what circumstances? When no self-assessment tax is payable, that is when no excess tax is demandable, or when no refund is to be granted by the department according to return of income file, the acknowledgement itself is to be treated as a notice of demand. But this is only for the purpose of machinery provisions of collecting the tax due alone. Otherwise, it does not give any more attachment. This deeming nature remains only for machinery provisions for collection. Otherwise, demand notice is different, because an acknowledgement is signed by the ministerial staff. A notice of demand or assessment order cannot be signed by the ministerial staff. It has to be signed only by the assessing officer. And moreover, those days, there scope for adding some prima facie additions. Now, prima facie addition cannot be made. Only arithmetical inaccuracies can be rectified in an intimation under section 143(1). Therefore, an appeal can be filed against intimation. So, acknowledgement is different, intimation is different, assessment order is different. So, a revised return can be validly filed even after the receipt of an intimation under section 143(1), but prior to complete assessment under section 143(3), provided the original return had been filed in time as prescribed and required by subsection 1 of 139. If the original return had been filed in time, a revised return can be filed later also. The AO cannot refuse to consider it at all, because the AO is expected to administer the law only according to statute. Even if assessee administer higher income by mistake or by misconception or not having been instructed properly, it is the duty of the AO according to courts to assist him and see that only legitimate tax is collected. Therefore, income returned can be more than the income assessed, where a claim is omitted to be made. It is the duty of the AO to point out. So they cannot say, no, income return should be more than income assessed or equal to. Income assessed can be less than income return. These are the principles decided in these cases. The AO cannot say, no, you have filed the return, I will accept it, I will close my eyes. That's why in tribunal in its concluding paragraph has said, it is indeed all well to paint justice blind, but she would do better without a bandage over her eyes. The bandage may of course be necessary, not for discriminating one person from another, but not for finding out where the truth is and where the dust lies. So you cannot be so straight and close your eyes and say, you have admitted it, I will accept it. You cannot make a claim. Claim can be made even in writing without filing a revised return. If it is in accordance with the legal provisions, it's not necessary that a revised return alone can bring the original income return to a lesser figure. The next one is, a return of income is filed on presumptive basis under section 44 AD. Purchases exceed 60 lakhs, but sales do not. What does 44 AD say? It's a presumptive taxation. It refers to section 44 AB. Section 44 AB says in the case of business assets, where the total sales, turnover or gross receipts of an assessee during a financial year exceed sum of 60 lakhs, the assessee shall get his accounts audited. In this case, sales do not exceed 60 lakhs, purchases alone exceed 60 lakhs. So what will be happening? Will presumptive taxation apply or not? In an interesting case before Supreme Court, the matter was taken up to Supreme Court in a small matter. What happened was, an assessee filed his return of income in the month of September. The AO issued a prosecution notice. He should have filed it in July. Why did you file it in September? The assessee replied, I am to get my books of accounts audited under section 44 AB. Mine is a tax audit case. I must obtain 3 CD form from a CA. Therefore, my due date is 30th September. Previously, it was October at that time and not July. So, my return is not belated. I have filed well within my time in advance. They also said, no, your sales have not exceeded 60 lakhs. Therefore, you are not liable to get books of account audited. He says, see, sir, my purchases have exceeded 60 lakhs. But section does not require purchases to be considered at all. The matter went up to Supreme Court. What happened was, see the section, the total of sales, turnover or gross receipts. If sales mean only turnover, substitute the word sales instead of turnover, reread the section. Sales, comma, sales or gross receipts. It is unreadable. Therefore, sales do not mean turnover. Turnover does not mean sales alone. It is something else. Turnover means what is turned over. What is turned over? Purchases are turned over. Therefore, the word turnover is a common name. Like a team is a singular or plural like that. Turnover refers to purchases and sales. Therefore, if purchases exceed 60 lakhs, sales do not exceed 60 lakhs, we are liable to get the books of account audited under section 44 AB. In another case before Kerala High Court also, under section 80 HHC deduction, there was a problem, the denominator, whether sales include sales tax and excise duty or not. The Lordships of Kerala High Court clarified, they concluded that they include only sales or purchases turnover, meaning it cannot include excise duty or sales tax. These are two decisions. First one is the application of the department was dismissed. Second is the Kerala High Court under 80. So that we must inform our staff to verify, to have a look at the purchase figure also, whether it exceeds 60 lakhs or not. One says, sir, even people who have exceeded 60 lakhs, they do not get their books of audited. You want purchases people to get audited. That's like saying, one person was caught by a police constable. He was traveling by bicycle. He was riding a bicycle late in the night without a light. So that fellow said, sir, you are catching me because my cycle does not have a light. That fellow is coming by walk without cycle itself. You don't catch him. Therefore, it's not like that. We have to verify the purchases also.
Sir, turnover means...
You need not add sales and purchases, sir. That's a
refer to purchases only.
Yes, turnover means.
Yeah, why don't they refer only to purchase?
Yes, sir.
Purchase,
Yes.
gross receipt.
Yes, sir.
They say turnover. Turnover means...
So turnover does not mean sales alone. That is my point. Even if sales do not exceed 60 lakhs, if purchases exceed 60 lakhs, that means turnover has exceeded 60 lakhs.
Even purchase and sales can be added.
No, cannot be added. Cannot be added. Or purchases or sales, not purchase and sales. Commission of Income Tax sets aside an assessment order under Section 263 and directs the AO to enhance the income assessed, adding certain specific items of receipts. Assessee makes fresh claims before the AO. Commission of Income Tax, acting under Section 263, can call for the returns and the enclosures and the records, and he can go through them and pass such orders as circumstances may justify. He may cancel the assessment, modify or enhance the assessment. That is what the section says. Can he cancel the assessment and modify? Cancel, modify or enhance. The Act envisages doing only one of these three acts. Once he sets aside an order, he cannot modify, he cannot enhance. Why? Because once an order is cancelled by his set aside order, the matter comes to nullity. No order exists at all. A non-existing order cannot be meddled with. It cannot be modified or enhanced. So once he sets aside, he must keep quiet. Suppose a commissioner sets aside an order cancelling it and then modifies it. What happened? The first order is valid. He is empowered to cancel it. The second part, modifying, is not valid. Is it that? It is not so. An issue cannot be cancelled without setting aside the entire order. His whole order gets vitiated. Once he does a mistake of doing more than one act which is not contemplated by the Act, the entire order is illegal. We are not Hamsapakshis to separate water from milk and milk, drinking the milk alone and leaving the water. Once a small drop of poison is added to the milk, the entire order is illegal. So if he sets aside an order cancelling it and then modifying, the entire order is cancelled. He cannot travel anything. That order is, then he will lose his time also. There will not be time to issue another notice. Therefore, he cannot do it.
Sir,
Now,
excuse me, sir. In PCD, while filling this turnover ratio and net profit ratio,
right.
whether we require to show this purchase figure there as a turnover?
Yes, sir. That is, once you go by sales for deciding whether 3CD is necessary, then by sales. In case where sales do not exceed 60 lakhs, you must divide it by purchases.
No, sales zero. Only purchases.
Yes, sir. Then purchase is turnover. You must apply purchases as the demand. The consequent will follow. So in this case, though the section 263 empowers the Commission of Income Tax to modify or enhance an assessment, can he make it? The judge-made law, courts, Madras High Court, Supreme Court have held that a commissioner cannot enhance an assessment at all. He must cancel it and leave it to the AO for doing a fresh assessment. So those section authorizes, because a supervisory authority cannot dictate to the assessing officer what the latter should do. It is one thing to say that the assessing officer is bound by the circulars and instructions, directions of the Central Board of Direct Taxes, but it is another thing that an assessing officer would lose his independence in the scheme of the Act, to his independence to pass an independent assessment order. At no stretch of imagination can a higher authority meddle or interfere with the freedom, which is the basic feature of the Act in the adjudication process. So if a Commissioner of Income Tax acting under section 263 enhances an assessment, it is invalid. He can only cancel it. If he cancels it, he must stop with it. He cannot do anything. Now, the answer is the order is cancelled. Matter comes back to the AO. can the assessee make a fresh claim? Once the assessing officer is free to consider the entire assessment, the assessee is also free. He is eligible, entitled to make fresh claims. Of course, provided, as I said earlier, the income already returned should not be claimed to be reduced. So, subject to this, the assessee is entitled to make a claim, a fresh claim which he had not made in the original return prior to setting aside of the order. 7. These are the decisions, sir, that a higher authority cannot interfere with the lower authority's order, he cannot issue instructions. Even Central Board of Direct Taxes cannot direct the AO to make a particular addition, to accept a particular thing, to make an addition in the assessment in a particular fashion. They can issue instructions under Section 119B only in respect of classes or groups of persons, not with reference to a specific assessee at all. Yes, sir. If we sign the order sheet saying that accepting, confessing that we have been heard by the commissioner, then we cannot raise this point. At that time, we can insist that it be heard only by the commissioner at all. Once you sign the order, you are prohibited. Section 292, capital B says, in respect of issue of notices, it applies here also. You cannot object to it after the completion of the assessment. Sometimes it is better to be heard by the PA than by the commissioner. 7 is, an assessee claims cash availability equivalent to depreciation notionally allowable under Section 44 AE4. Section 44 AE4 says for larger transport vehicles 5,000 per month, smaller ones 4,500 per month, provided the number of vehicles owned does not exceed 10, it's a presumptive taxation assessment. Now, a vehicle is plied only during the last, say, 1 week of the financial year, March 25th to 31st alone. The depreciation is deemed to be allowed while arriving at 5,000 per month or 4,500 per month. So an assessee credits his capital account with huge cash. The AO requires him to prove the natural source of the cash introduced. He says, sir, income from lorry. You applied the lorry only for 1 week. How could you get so much of cash? Cash profit is this 5,000 per month plus depreciation, which is deemed to have been allowed. That is the cash profit. Because it is anomalous to say that one lorry, one vehicle earned so much of income during 1 week. But though it is illogical, it is legal. Once the department says depreciation is deemed to have been allowed, then the 5,000 per month, that is for 1 week proportionate, plus depreciation, you can very well credit. It cannot be again added as income and other sources. This is because the department also does not lose anything, because once the depreciation is deemed to have been allowed, the WDV of the vehicle goes down. When the lorry is sold, when the blocks come to a nil, then the remaining amount will be deemed to be a short-term capital loss. Therefore, department also does not lose anything. It is correct. You can claim, you can credit 5,000 per month plus depreciation to the capital account, even though the vehicle was played only for a few days or at least say 1 day. The Chennai Tribunal has allowed this. It has not been reported. It has allowed this claim. They say once you deem something, all the corollaries consequently should follow. It is based on certain remarks contained in an appellate order. The assessment years prior to a period of 7 years are reopened in a third party's case. So what are the remarks that can be contained in appellate order? It may be a finding or a direction. A finding or direction is recognized by Section 153 of the Act. A finding or direction should be valid. It should be necessary for the disposal of the appeal or reference or revision. It should relate to that assessee, it should relate to that relevant assessment here. Otherwise, it is not a valid finding. It can be better understood by an example. Suppose A files an appeal before CET appeals. He claims it is not my income, it is income of B. The assessing officer says it is not income of B, it is income of A. Both of them accept that it is income of one of them. It is not, does not belong to anybody else, C or D or E, anyone else. So the CET appeals has to give a finding, or the AT has to give a finding whether the income belongs to A or B. Therefore, this finding is necessary for the disposal of appeal. If he says it is income of B, A cannot be assessed. If he says it is A, B cannot be assessed. So this is a step in the process of reaching the ultimate conclusion. And such a finding or direction should be in the nature of an order requiring positive complaints. If he says it is not income of A, whether the income of B or not, the AO may decide. Then it is not a valid finding at all. And the AO should be bound by it. Say block assessment. Quite often in the block assessment, which was in the statute book earlier, some appellate authorities gave a finding. It is not undisclosed income according to definition. So it should not be assessed as a block income at all. The AO may consider whether it can be assessed as a regular income. It is not a finding. If assessment is reopened on the basis of such a vague finding which does not require a positive complaint by the AO, the reassessment will not be valid. So it should be in the nature of a positive complaint. Now in this case, after the time limit is over, the CET appeals or the tribunal directs the prior to 7 years, they direct the assessment to be made. The appellate authority is also a creature of the statute only. He cannot extend the time beyond the limit. Suppose the assessment year involved is 2006-7. The matter involved is the CET appeal says it is income of 2005-6 and not 6-7. He cannot say that. He can say that only if the AO had passed the assessment order on the date of passing the assessment order for 2006-7, he should have time under the Act to pass an order for the preceding assessment year. Otherwise, the appellate authority cannot make the AO, give the AO power to travel beyond the time limit. If the Commissioner of Appeals had been the AO at that relevant point of time, could he have made an assessment? No. If it is not so, he cannot make an assessment. And moreover, the case study says in a third party's case, all these things bind only the appellant and any person whose matters are closely, intimately involved in the appeal. A stranger is not bound by a direction unless he is closely involved in the appeal. In this example, if the CET appeal says assess C, it is not valid because the matter is involving only A and B alone. So there are several decisions on this point to say what is a finding direction, what is valid, invalid. Mine is an assessing officer reopened an assessment as a higher depreciation rate of 80% was claimed on ordinary electric generator and a windmill machinery without exercising option under Rule 5. Windmill machineries, there is Rule 5 which says if you want higher rate of depreciation like 80% instead of the ordinary machinery rate of 15%, you must file an option before the due date for filing the return of income. Actually, it does not apply to all assets. It applies only to electricity undertakings. But the AG audit people are objecting. They say option has not been exercised. Therefore, allow only 15 and not 80. If the return of income had been filed on the due date, that means the assessee has exercised his option by claiming a rate of 80% per annum on an ordinary machinery or windmill machinery which is eligible to 80%. Having claimed 80%, that itself shows that he has exercised his option. There is no prescribed form for exercising this option. Another point is here, on ordinary electric generator, the assessee claimed 80% and it has been allowed. Therefore, the AO wants to reopen the assessment. Let us go to appendix which prescribes the rates of depreciation. Item 8G13M talks with windmill machinery. What she says is renewable energy devices including special devices like electric motors and pumps running on wind energy. Electric motors and pumps running on wind energy. So electric generators which do not run on windmill energy, ordinary small electric generators which we see in all shops, are they eligible to 80% or 15%? Courts have held that the correct rate is 80% and not 15%. Not that windmill alone is eligible to 80%. All electric generators are eligible for depreciation at the rate of 80% because the appendix, the particular clause in the appendix says electric generators and pumps running on wind energy. The word both is conspicuously absent. Only if the appendix clause had said electric generators and pumps both running on wind energy. Due to the absence of the word both, it is eligible to 80% depreciations according to courts of law. Moreover, depreciation is not a point in respect of which an assessment can be reopened after 4 years because it is to be based on material supplied by the assessee. Only because assessee had provided necessary details, you had allowed 80%. Otherwise, you would not allow any depreciation at all. So, rate of depreciation is a matter of inference to be drawn by the AO from the facts placed by the assessee. Therefore, once he has concluded 80%, whatever be the fact, legally also he cannot reopen. These are decisions which say ordinary electric generators are eligible for depreciation at 80%. I don't think any claim has been made. Many of us are claiming only for generators only 50% only. Both Rajasthan and Gujarat MP have all confirmed because first two are same, one is ITR, one is CTR. Item 10 is having allowed a valid return of income to get barred by limitation of time, an assessing officer reopens the same by issuing notice under section 148 later. An assessee files a return of income, no action is taken, it is not processed, it is not selected for scrutiny, it is allowed to get time barred. The return of income is missing, or perhaps it was made to be missing by someone. Whatever the position is, the consequences, it has got time barred. Can issue 148 notice. Once the AO finds that there was an understatement of income or excessive loss, allowance, relief or deduction granted, if the ingredients of section 147 are complied with, then the AO is eligible to reopen an assessment. The failure to issue a notice in time under section 143(2) will not render him powerless. That because no action was taken, he can very well reopen the assessment. So we cannot be happy that the return has been lost and assessment cannot be reopened at all. Explanation 2B is clear. At a very recent 337 ITR, Delhi High Court has also confirmed that even though 143(2) notice is not issued within 12 months from the end of the month in which return is furnished, if the AO has reason to believe the income has escaped assessment, he can reopen it. 11 is additions are proposed to be made in assessment only on points not mentioned as reasons for reopening the same. Assessee also makes fresh claims for deduction during the reassessment proceedings. For this, we have to go through the history of the 148, though some of the items are not in the statute book now. First, what happened was when an assessing officer reopened an assessment, he could assess such income. That was the position. Then courts held such means as already explained, as hitherto referred to. Therefore, the such refers to reason recorded as having escaped assessment. So the AO was bound only to assess such income in respect of which he had recorded a reason as he believed to have escaped assessment, though chargeable to tax. He could not bring to assessment other items. The reopening was qua under assessment and not entry assessment. He could not reopen, reconsider and reassess all items. In 1989, there was an amendment to say the AO may proceed to assess such income and such other income which comes to his notice during the course of reassessment proceedings. So first legislation was wrong. Second one, they amended it. Courts held, the amendment says, and such other income which comes to your notice during reassessment proceedings. Here also you cannot make fishing inquiries. Such escaped income in the reassessment should come on its own to your notice during reassessment proceedings. To tell you an example, suppose an assessment is reopened for considering a bogus borrowal. As he had claimed that he had borrowed, but it was found later that the bogus borrowal was bogus. So he reopens, he seeks to assess that borrowal amount. Going through the ledger account, interest amount is found credited. So it comes to his notice during the reassessment proceedings. Once the borrowal is non-genuine, interest is also non-genuine, he disallows the interest. This is one thing. Now the AO tried to inquire, make a fishing inquiry, what is the size of your family? How many children, where are they studying, whether household income is sufficient. He could not do it. Court held, it does not come to your notice during reassessment proceedings. This is a roving inquiry. You cannot make it the reassessment on those points quashed. This second time. Then the section was again amended in 2009 with effect from 1989. 20 years back with effect from 1989. Explanation 3 was introduced to under section 47 in 2009 Finance 2 bill. It looks as if we receive a letter from your traffic police department. Why you traveled by your car or by two-wheeler in the one-way traffic direction on this day? Our camera has caught you. The man replies, no sir, you have declared that road as one-way traffic only now, not on the day on which I traveled. Traffic police replies, no, we have declared it as one-way traffic with retrospective effect. Therefore, that is why what the section says, with respect to 20 years, retrospectively they have done. So this hat trick, again they have partly failed. This matter also went to court in some cases, but of course partly. What happened was, the AO records a reason under section 148(2). Number 1, this item has escaped assessment, according to me, in my belief. Number 2, this is escaped assessment. Then he goes to reassessment. Suppose one of them is, an assessee had made huge amounts as fixed deposit at the bank. Interest had been paid, TDS had been made. The AO goes to the records, whether annexure is returned or in the scrutiny case, he goes. Interest income not admitted from that bank. Balance sheet does not show any fixed deposit at all with that bank. So he records a reason. I have received information from this bank that this assessee had made FDs, paid interest, the bank has paid him interest, he has not admitted, I am reopening assessment. He also goes through the return. Then the assessee confirms, sir, this belongs to my joint Indo-Indian family. I have admitted in my HUF's return. So it need not have been admitted or assessed in individual's return. No income has escaped. All right, I will go through other points. No, sir, you cannot go through other points. Why I can go through the explanation 3, now introduced in 2009 with effect from 89, permits me. Court say no, because the explanation says the AO may proceed to assess such income and also any other income which has escaped assessment though chargeable tax. And also, courts have interpreted the term and also as, and it is not or. If they had said such income or any other income, the AO would have been clothed with powers and jurisdiction to assess other income. They say and. The legislature has not been content with the use of the word and. It says and also. Only if the AO assesses the income, the issue in respect of its reason has been recorded, he will have powers to proceed with other income also, though he had not recorded. So entire assessment is not open. To close jurisdiction with his powers, he will have to put down his hands. He cannot put to tax any other item unless the item in respect of which reason has been recorded is actually fined during the reassessment proceedings as escaped and assessable at all. Otherwise, he must close it because section 147 and 148 are supplementary and complementary to each other. The term and also is not alternative. It is conjunctive and cumulative according to courts. So here also hat trick, they have failed. This, if the proceedings continue, he can claim. Again, provided income should not be claimed to be less than the income originally returned. If the assessing officer goes through the other items, assessee is entitled to make fresh claims also. These are several cases. Many high courts have held. Yes, once the assessment is invalid, proceedings will drop. There is no scope for making fresh claim. If the AO is empowered to go through the other items, then the assessee also can make fresh claims, provided the income is not claimed to go down less than what was originally returned. And the explanation can only explain the contents. Explanation cannot and therefore does not override the necessity of fulfilling the conditions which are contained in the specific part of the major section. That's the difference between explanation and proviso. Explanation cannot override a section. They should not introduce this in section and they should not have included the words and also. They should have used the word or. That is what the courts say. And this reason record is very important. We must know what the reason is recorded. An assessee will not be informed the reason recorded unless he files a return in response to 148 notice. In one of my claims cases, a notice under 148 was received. I asked the client, have you omitted to admit any item of income, you tell me. So that at least before the hearing, before we are informed of the item which is omitted according to department, we will voluntarily file it and at least try to escape 271C proceedings. He assured me, nothing is omitted, sir. You admit the original admitted return income itself in the revised return also. I was not happy. I unofficially found that a bank account had been omitted. I gathered information that the bank account, I told him, oh, have they found it out? Then he gave me the copy of bank statement relating to that relevant year. So I worked out the peak credit, at least instead of adding all gross deposits, at least peak credit can be added. I added the peak credit in the revised return to respond to 148 and filed the return, went for the scrutiny assessment. I was proudly appearing before the AO because what the AO was going to ask me, I had already admitted. When the AO showed me, I found that that was a third bank account which the AO was in possession. AO was not aware of this bank account. I need not admit it at all. So it's very important to know what the reason recorded is. The assessing officer claims that the permissible period for second reopening is to run from the date of the first reassessment and not of original reassessment. That is, the assessment is reopened. It can be reopened before the expiry of 4 years from the end of the relevant assessment in such circumstances and before the expiry of 6 years from the end of the relevant assessment year. So when a reassessment is made, when AO claims, I have made reassessment this year, from this year 4 more years are available. Then there will be no end at all. 6 years more available. 4 plus 4 plus 6 it will go on. That's why Supreme Court says it should always be borne in mind that the policy of law is such that there should be finality to all legal proceedings. Stale issues cannot be permitted to be reactivated beyond a certain stage. Lapse of time must repose, set in and set at rest all judicial and quasi-judicial controversies as it should in all spheres of human life. So they say there should be to end at all. The assessment for the period is we reckon from the end of the relevant assessment year and not the year during which the relevant assessment was made. That is 12. On Madras account superconditions are available. 13 is a return is income is processed under 143(1). A reference is made to valuation cell to assess the amount of cost of construction of a building. On list of sales report, notice is issued to reopen the assessment. Quite often when a survey takes place, what they do is, what are the buildings constructed during the last 6 years? They refer to cell. Valuation cell gives a figure, which is almost always more than the cost of construction admitted. They issue a reopening notice. Is it valid? A valuation cell's report is not a perfect document. It is an estimate. It is vague. It is not specific. It does not suggest any falsity at all. They only apply a rate per square meter. They apply. Then percentage, 6% for electrification, 10% for watering, 3% for plan approval, etc. It does not show, it does not mean, it cannot lead to conclusion that the assessee had incurred a higher amount of cost of construction than what is admitted. Therefore, the reference, if it is arbitrarily, if it is referred to valuation cell, it is invalid, and the reassessment made consequent to receipt of such valuation report is also invalid. There should be a pre-decisional formation of opinion on the part of AO before issuing notice to the valuation cell for reference that the cost was understated, and there should be a categorical finding on the order sheet that there was understatement of cost of construction. Otherwise, the reference is not valid. Reopening assessment made on the basis of such a reference is also invalid. Madras High Court and Supreme Court have held so in these ITRs. Is an assessing officer signs a notice under section 148 on 30th March on the basis of a reason recorded by his predecessor and dispatches it on 1st April. Section 129 says where an assessing officer has conducted some inquiries or recorded certain proceedings, the successor incumbent can proceed at the stage at which it was left his predecessor. But there are two exceptions. One is 217(1)(c). A concealment penalty cannot be levied by one incumbent on the basis of hearing had by the predecessor. The person who levies a penalty should give the hearing. Similarly, for 148 also, if one assessing officer records a reason for his belief which led him to believe that income chargeable of that assessee for that alone assessment had escaped assessment, another successor incumbent officer, if he signs a notice of reopening issues, the notice is invalid. Because the matter of revealing satisfaction is not an empty procedural formality. It is a mandatory requirement of law. The person who signs a notice issues should have been led to believe that the income chargeable tax had escaped assessment, and thus it is not valid. Moreover, the section says the notice should be issued before 31st March. It is not sufficient if he signs. Signing an order sheet or a document is not equivalent to its issue. Issue means serve, deliver. It need not be delivered or served on the assessee. At least it should be served or delivered to the post office on 31st March or to the courier service at least. It should leave the department. He cannot say, I signed it on 31st, I dispatched it on 1st April. So I have reopened it on 31st March. He cannot say it because proper service of notice on a proper person, proper time is required, except that under section 292 capital B, you must subject it before the completion of the assessment. If you very obediently appear before the AO in response to such assessments and file a revised written in response notice, you cannot claim it at a later date. These are decisions. Even Madras High Court has held that issue means serve, deliver, dispatch. You cannot say it has been issued. Signing is issued. Signing is not issued. I have purchased stamps. I have dispatched. The dispatch entry shows I gave it to the dispatch clerk. It is not sufficient. It should leave the department's building. Otherwise, it is not valid. Commission of Income Tax drops proposal made under section 163. An assessing officer drops proposal under section 154. Then the AO reopens a notice, issues a notice under section 148 with a view to charge the same amount of income to tax. Once 263 notice is issued, Commissioner goes to the matter. He, in this case study, arrives at a finding that income had not escaped assessment. It was not erroneous. It was not prejudicial to the interest of the department. In the other case, 154 is dropped. When a matter is considered under 154, what is the meaning? The records contained it, because 154 deals with mistakes apart from record. What was available already on record cannot lead the AO to arrive at a different conclusion and resulting in the issue of a notice. So if 263 is dropped, if 154 is dropped, the AO cannot issue a reopening notice on the same set of facts. That's what the Madras Tribunal has said. On the basis of Supreme Court's interpretation of provisions of section of the Act, an assessment made under Section 143(3) is reopened after 4 years. Because Supreme Court, if it decides a matter and interprets it that a particular item of receipt is liable to be taxed, if it had not been taxed, then that means income chargeable tax has escaped assessment. Supreme Court does not interpret law from the date on which it declares law. In the interpretation takes back to the date on which the particular provision was introduced in the tax books, statute books. Therefore, income has escaped assessment. But the basic difference is, if an assessment is reopened within 4 years expiry from the end of the relevant assessment year, that is different. For that, the AO should establish that income had escaped assessment, though chargeable to tax. But if the reopening is made, if the notice is issued after the expiry of 4 years from the end of the relevant assessment year, and within 6 years, of course, then the whole thing is on a different platform under different circumstances. It is not sufficient for the department to prove that income chargeable to tax had escaped assessment. The AO should also additionally establish that the escapement of income chargeable tax resulted on account of failure of the assessee to furnish a return of income under Section 139(1) or to truly and fully disclose all material facts necessary for computation of income. Number one, there should have been assessment under Section 143(3). The assessee should have failed to disclose all material facts truly and fully. Otherwise, even if the Supreme Court says that some income is taxable, it will not automatically lead to validity of reopening on the assessment. And there are